On February 11, 1979, a token of friendship to Egypt from Venezuela in the form of the 500-kilogram, 2.3-meter tall bronze statue of famous leader was unveiled at Kasr El Dubara Square near the affluent district of Garden City in downtown Cairo. It was really quite a grand occasion. The Venezuelan president's wife even attended. But it was also a day that didn't make much sense to all Egyptians at the time. Why? That same day, the square was renamed after the leader whose statue was unveiled, but it wasn't of an Egyptian leader. It was of Simon Bolivar. But hang on, Simon Bolivar was a Venezuelan military and political leader. What's a statue of him doing in Egypt? To understand why a statue of him in this exact place and why an entire square was renamed after him, a little history lesson is needed. Various civilizations and empires have occupied and walked Egypt's streets, with three of the most notable being the Mamluk, Ottoman, and British occupations. Egypt's borders and streets have been named, designed, renamed, and redesigned multiple times over the course of its long history, resulting in a melting pot of influences.
The real planning and building of current Middletown, Cairo, or the city center, was during Khedive Ismail.
That's Ihab Sulaiman. He's a minister plenipotentiary in the Egyptian Foreign Service.
The story goes that he actually assigned one of the most famous city planners of his time, and that's the engineer Haussmann. Haussmann was the person responsible for planning of modern Paris in the 19th century, and hence the resemblance we see in Cairo city center.
One needs to not look too far to see just how much the area and this particular square today are filled with history. It's even in the street names. According to theojt, author of the address book, street names are about identity, wealth, and race, but most of all, they are about power. That is certainly the case here. The hub of these occupations was mainly based in downtown Cairo, near Tawfiq Diab Street, which Simon Bolivar Square is an extension of. The Mamluks constructed many of the squares in this area for building spaces for their celebrations and as residential areas for the rulers. The Ottomans used this area as a place of creativity and innovation, with the old opera house and various palaces. It was also during this period that the square was known by a third different name, Ilhami Pasha Street, named after Khedive Abbas's son, before being called Kasr El Dubara Square after a nearby palace. When the British arrived in 1882, their goal was to occupy the Egyptian army barracks, also known as the Kasr El Nil barracks, that were set up there as a ruling and residential area, which they did until their 1956 evacuation. And so, this area was primarily for the elite. Everyday Egyptians had very little to do with the area. Now again, just how does Simon Bolivar fit here? Well known as the liberator in many South American countries, Bolivar fought against Spanish colonialists in the early 19th century to grant the countries of Venezuela, Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Panama their independence. You might still be thinking, that's really great and all, but this doesn't explain why there's a statue of him in Egypt of all places, and why a whole square was renamed just because of this. During the 1960s and 1970s, Egyptian and Venezuelan ties were getting stronger due to shared values of being against colonialism, as well as in their oil exploitation and trade interests. Meanwhile, the square was renamed because of how these shared values and this particular Venezuelan leader epitomized the history of the area.
Egypt, especially after 1952, played a very significant role when it came to the independence movement in Africa. Accordingly, Egypt was believed during this era to be one of the epicenters when it came to promoting the independence of African and third world countries. Part of that, those countries, of course, were the Latin American countries in the 20th century. So accordingly, having Simon Bolivar, who represents the independence movement of Latin America, having his statue in Cairo only makes sense.
Today, the American and British embassies are located nearby, as well as the American Research Center and the Nile Hilton Hotel, which is where the Egyptian Army Barracks and British Occupation Barracks used to be. The square has seen its fair share of chaos, from the fighting against colonialism in 1919 and again in the mid-1940s to the mid-1950s to the present day. Many clashes took place here during the 2011 and 2012 to 2013 protests. These clashes resulted in damage to the statue and the theft of Bolivar's copper sword, as well as damage to other nearby landmarks such as the Villa Casdali, a villa modeled after Central European hotels of the early 1900s. With many restorations over the years though, Simon Bolivar's statue still stands tall in the square today, commemorating the South American anti-colonialist figure and surrounded by memories and traces of Egypt's own colonial past and cosmopolitan influences.